We often believe that the world moves only forward, that each generation knows more than the one before it, that progress is permanent, that knowledge, once discovered, can never truly be lost. But history does not agree with us. Scattered across the earth are traces of understanding that appeared, flourished, and then disappeared, not destroyed in a single moment, not erased by one disaster, but slowly, quietly, until nothing remained except questions. Tonight, we will explore knowledge humans once possessed, but can no longer recreate. This is not a story of myths, not a story of fantasy. It is a story of silence. Modern life surrounds us with technology, screens, machines, instant answers. It is easy to assume that the past was simpler, that ancient people lived without understanding, that they observed the world, but never truly mastered it. Yet when we look closely, this belief begins to fade, because there are things they accomplished that we still struggle to explain. Not because we lack intelligence, but because we lack their context. Knowledge does not exist in isolation. It depends on culture, on continuity, on traditions passed carefully from one mind to another. When that chain breaks, knowledge does not sleep, it disappears. Across the world, massive stone structures still stand. Stones weighing tens, sometimes hundreds of tons, cut with precision, placed with intention, aligned with care. Even today, with all our machines, recreating such work would require enormous effort. And yet, these structures were built by societies without steel tools, without engines, without digital measurement. How did they shape stone with such accuracy? How did they transport it across vast distances? How did they raise it into positions that still defy explanation? In some ancient walls, the stones fit together so precisely that not even a blade can slide between them. No mortar, no cement, just stone against stone. Edges curved, surfaces matched, as if the rocks themselves decided to embrace. We call this technique ashlar masonry. We know the name. But the method, the patient process, the tools they must have used, those remain uncertain. Modern engineers can approximate the result, but only with lasers, computer measurements, diamond-tipped saws. That had none of these things. Yet their walls have survived earthquakes that destroyed everything built afterward. The stones still stand, still silent, still keeping their secrets. Writing is one of humanity's greatest achievements. But not all writing survived. Some scripts remain undeciphered. Their symbols are known, their shapes preserved, but their meanings are gone. We can see the words, but we cannot hear their voices. The disc that will not speak. On the island of Crete, archaeologists found a clay disc, spiral patterns, strange symbols, pressed in a clay over 3,000 years ago. Both sides covered in marks that resemble nothing else ever discovered. We call it the Phaistos disc. It sits in a museum now, studied, photographed, measured from every angle, but it will not speak. Scholars have proposed hundreds of translations, each one confident, each one different. Perhaps it is a prayer, perhaps a calendar, perhaps a game dot, or perhaps it is something we can no longer imagine. Because the people who made it are gone, and with them went the context that would make the symbols mean something. Scripts written in silence. The Phaistos disc is not alone. Proto-Elamite, the Indus script, Rongorongo from Easter Island. All of them waiting, all of them silent. These writings once carried laws, rituals, scientific observations, and daily records of life. Now they carry only mystery. Without living readers, without cultural memory, language becomes stone, and knowledge, no matter how carefully recorded, can still be lost. Long before telescopes, humans watched the sky, night after night, season after season, generation after generation. They tracked the movement of stars. They measured the cycles of the moon. They understood the rhythm of the sun. Some ancient calendars remain astonishingly accurate. Some alignments reveal knowledge of celestial cycles lasting thousands of years. This kind of understanding requires patience, memory, continuity beyond a single lifetime. In 1901, divers exploring a shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera found something impossible: a corroded lump of bronze. For decades, it sat in storage, unexamined, unimportant, until someone looked closer. Inside the corrosion were gears, dozens of them, precisely cut, carefully arranged. An analog computer over 2,000 years old. It predicted eclipses, tracked planetary movements, calculated the Olympic Games schedule. The complexity of its design would not appear again for another 1,000 years. We have rebuilt it. We understand what it does, but we still do not know who designed it, or how many others like it were made, or how this knowledge vanished so completely. Because if one existed, how many were lost, and what else did they build that we never found? Ancient Polynesians crossed thousands of miles of ocean without instruments, no compass, no maps, no GPS, just the stars, the waves, the birds. They memorized the rising and setting points of dozens of stars. They read the ocean's rhythm like a language. They knew which swells meant shallow water, which clouds promised land, which currents would carry them home. This knowledge was taught through chance, through practice, through voyages where mistakes meant death. And for a time, it was almost lost. When colonization arrived, the traditional navigators were no longer needed. The chance faded. The practices stopped. By the 1970s, only a handful of people still remembered. Some of that knowledge was revived, relearned, preserved, but we will never know how much was lost in the silence between generations. There are materials from the ancient world that resist imitation, concrete that grows stronger with time, metals with properties we still struggle to reproduce, pigments that refuse to fade after thousands of years. We know what these materials contain. We know where they came from, but the precise methods, the subtle processes, the small decisions made by hand, those details are gone, and without them, the knowledge becomes incomplete, not lost in theory, but lost in practice. Roman concrete that heals itself. Roman harbors still stand beneath the sea. 2,000 years of salt water, waves, storms, and yet their concrete grows stronger. Modern concrete crumbles in seawater within decades. But Roman concrete seems to repair itself. Scientists have studied it. They know it contains volcanic ash, lime, and seawater. They know the chemical reactions that make it durable. But when they try to recreate it, something is missing. Perhaps it is the specific type of ash. Perhaps the mixing process. Perhaps the curing time. Small details that were never written down because everyone knew them, until everyone forgot. Damascus steel and the vanished formula. For centuries, blades forged in Damascus were legendary. Strong enough to cut through iron. Flexible enough to bend without breaking. Sharp enough to split a hair. The steel had visible patterns, flowing lines, like water frozen in metal. Swordsmiths tried to replicate it for generations. They failed. By the 1800s, the last Damascus steel had been forged. The knowledge died with the craftsmen who held it. Modern metallurgists have come close. They understand it likely involves specific ores from India, precise temperatures, careful folding, but close is not the same as knowing. The original method is gone, and with it, the swords that were once worth more than gold. Greek fire that burned on water. In the year 672, the Byzantine Empire faced invasion. Enemy ships filled the horizon. And then, the Byzantines unleashed something the world had never seen. Fire that burned on water. It could not be extinguished with water. It clung to ships, to skin, to everything it touched. Enemies called it liquid fire, sea fire, Roman fire. We call it Greek fire, and we do not know how to make it. The recipe was so secret that only the emperor and a few trusted craftsmen knew the full formula. It was never written down, not in full. When the Byzantine Empire fell, the secret died with it. We know it involved petroleum, perhaps quicklime, perhaps sulfur, but the exact combination, the method of projection, the way it was controlled, all of it gone. The knowledge hidden in taste. Not all lost knowledge comes from grand monuments or ancient battles. Some of it lived in kitchens. Silphium, the spice worth its weight in gold. 2,000 years ago, a plant grew along the coast of North Africa. Its name was silphium. The Romans valued it more than almost anything else. They used it as medicine, as a contraceptive, as a seasoning. It appeared on coins, in poems, in recipes that promised to transform any meal. And then it disappeared, overharvested, extinct. The last stalk was reportedly given to the Emperor Nero. We have descriptions of its taste. We know where it grew, but we will never taste it again. And every recipe that relied on it is now incomplete, forever missing the ingredient that made it work. Ancient physicians understood things we are only now beginning to rediscover. Surgery without modern tools. In ancient India, surgeons performed rhinoplasty, reconstructive surgery on the nose. This was not experimental, not theoretical. It was documented, taught, refined over generations. The Sushruta Samhita, an ancient medical text, describes procedures in careful detail. How to measure skin, how to create flaps, how to prevent infection with specific plant extracts. For centuries, this knowledge existed in practice. And then it faded, not because it did not work, but because the tradition was disrupted. It would not be rediscovered in the West until the 1700s. Centuries of unnecessary suffering, because knowledge was not passed forward. The healing techniques that vanished. Trepanation, the surgical removal of part of the skull. We find ancient skulls with holes carefully cut into the bone, and many of them show signs of healing, which means the patient survived. They lived with sections of skull removed. Some had multiple procedures. How did ancient surgeons know where to cut? How did they prevent infection without antibiotics? How did they manage pain without modern anesthesia? We can only guess. The patients cannot tell us. The surgeons left no notes. Only the bones remain, silent, but undeniably real. Knowledge is fragile. It depends on people, on teaching, on repetition. When civilizations collapse, knowledge collapses with them. Libraries burn, languages fade, skills lose their purpose. Once a technique is no longer needed, it is no longer taught. And once it is no longer taught, it is forgotten, not because it lacked value, but because it lacked continuity. The library that held the world. In Alexandria, there once stood a library. Not just any library. The library. It held scrolls from every corner of the known world. Greek philosophy, Egyptian medicine, Babylonian astronomy. Hundreds of thousands of texts. Some were originals, the only copies in existence. And then, over time, through fire, through conquest, through neglect, it was gone. We know the names of some books that were kept there. We have references, mentions, citations and other works. But the books themselves lost. Imagine all the plays we no longer have. All the scientific observations that were never copied. All the histories written by people who witnessed events firsthand. Gone. Not because they were unimportant, but because knowledge needs protection. And protection failed. After knowledge disappears, there is silence. Ruins remain. Artifacts endure. But understanding fades. We interpret. We guess. We theorize. But the original voices are gone. The past does not argue with us. It does not correct us. It simply waits. Questions without answers. Why did the Maya abandon their cities? How did the Nazca create lines in the desert visible only from the sky? What happened on Easter Island that left only stone heads and a silent landscape? We build theories. Climate change, war, disease, resource depletion. But these are echoes, reflections. The people who knew are not here to confirm or deny our guesses. Perhaps you think this is only about the past, ancient history, distant civilizations. But knowledge is disappearing right now. Language is dying in silence. Every 2 weeks, a language dies. With it goes unique words for things no other language has names for. Ways of thinking that existed nowhere else. Stories, songs, prayers, gone. When the last speaker of a language dies, an entire way of seeing the world disappears. And we are often not even there to notice. Crafts that no one learns anymore. There are artisans still alive who hold knowledge no one else has. Traditional boat-building techniques, natural dyeing methods, instrument-making secrets. They're growing old, and often there is no one learning from them. Not because the knowledge is worthless, but because the world has moved on. Soon, they will be gone, and their knowledge will join the silence. Perhaps the greatest lesson is not what we lost, but how easily it happened. Knowledge is not permanent. Progress is not guaranteed. Even today, what we know exists only as long as someone remembers. We stand on the shoulders of giants, but those giants stood on other shoulders. And sometimes, the chain breaks. The earth remembers longer than we do. Stone remembers longer than words. But even stone eventually fades. And so, as you rest now, as your thoughts slow, as sleep begins to pull you into your own silence, remember this. Humanity has forgotten before, and it may forget again. The knowledge you carry, the things you know, the skills you have learned, they are not guaranteed to outlive you, unless you pass them on. What remains is what we choose to preserve, or what we allow to fade into silence.